Welcome back. All right, power rankings. So I haven't done an actual power ranking since the end of the regular season, right? But I've been doing updates, and I made a few tweaks. I'm fine with where these teams are going into free agency, expansion, everything else, and then there'll be some big moves after that. I just wanted to do a power rankings today, just to say here's where everything's at. This doesn't count as like part of the official tally. I'm not like tracking it. I don't have my book or nothing today. So it's just a fun way to look at where teams are. And notice 32. So this is the first official power rankings, which includes Seattle. So that being said, Seattle has to be 32 right now because while I like where Seattle's at and what they've done in terms of their hirings, they don't have players yet. So I can't grade them ahead of Buffalo. They don't have players yet. Stop. So during the season, kind of funny, but reality, Buffalo was still 31st. They weren't 32nd. So, Seattle, they're at the bottom. I don't anticipate them staying at the bottom. But what's interesting is, I don't think expansion is necessarily going to tell us the whole story. But I think we've sort of readied ourselves for them to be good after what happened with Vegas, that maybe people are going to overrate Seattle. It should be interesting to see. Number 31 is Buffalo. So, yeah, Buffalo kind of has to be 31. You'll notice the logos are much larger than the ones I normally use. I'm using all the auto emblems I've been picking up during the year. And this has told me which teams I don't have yet and which teams I need to find. And not all teams are easy to find. So Buffalo was relatively easy to find, though. I don't know whether that's because they're popular or they're not popular. Maybe one or the other, right? Maybe there's a lot of supply because there was a lot of demand. But Buffalo right now is going through what they've been going through for a while, and so we're waiting for things to get better with Buffalo. I personally would like to see things get better with Buffalo as soon as possible. Number 30, Anaheim. So there you go, Anaheim. I have one coming for the Oilers. I don't have an Oilers one, so the Oilers one is similar to this. Same design, just with like an Oilers logo and the Oilers colors. But Anaheim, still going through their rebuild. I think things are probably going to get a bit better for them next year. But yeah, I didn't really move teams around so much at the end of the season. Number 29 is Columbus. Columbus, rough year. Now Tortorella's moved on. We'll see what they do in the offseason, but they're still 29th. 28th, LA, which might be my favorite of the Chrome ones that I have. I think that might be my favorite. The LA Kings, it was a year that they had their good points and their down points, the same as the year before, and it feels like they're on the verge of turning things around. I like the Arvidsson acquisition. I didn't move them around based on the Arvidsson acquisition. We'll see how the rest of the team shakes out before I start moving them up. But I do like picking up Arvidsson. 27 is Vancouver. So since the last time I did power rankings, Vancouver finished out their season against Calgary. I believe I've moved Vancouver and Calgary based on how that turned out. I know I was moving them around. I don't know if they're in a different spot than they were in the last power rankings. But hey, for Vancouver, it has to get better next year, right? Canuck fan speaking. So maybe it doesn't, but it should. The core that they have, and if Pettersson can come back in shape and ready to go and 100% healthy, things should get better for Vancouver. They have the goaltending, they have the depth, I think, up front. I know they're looking to add a third line center, but and then the blue line is, we'll see. Number 26, I do not have a chrome auto emblem for the New Jersey Devils. I don't. New Jersey, their season was kind of all over the place, which was kind of sort of expected. But I do have some optimism when it comes to New Jersey for next year. So we'll see if they move up next season. 25 is San Jose. So the Sharks, bottom row. I'm not spending a lot of time on this because I don't think very many teams, if any, have moved from the last time I did a power rankings in this bottom row. But yeah, for San Jose, there are some interesting contracts there. We'll see how many of them are still there after the offseason's done. I'm guessing they all will be, but we'll see, right? Doug Wilson may pull something out. Number 24 is Detroit. Detroit surprised some people, myself included, with how competitive they were this year and how they gave it their all for a full 60 minutes. And if they keep doing that next year, and they're gaining that talent and depth as well, they could surprise some people. I'm not going to say playoffs, because that would be crazy, but they should be far more competitive. The Atlantic, though, is going to be kind of sort of stacked, so that's a problem. Number 23, Arizona. So that's the gecko off the shoulder of their Space Coyote jersey. So yeah, the Space Gecko gets on the board at 23. Arizona, another interesting offseason on the way for them, and we'll see how it goes. And of course, if you look in the bottom here, I've got each team in their own division. I thought there was too much just blank space in here. I thought, well, I'll put all 32 teams on in their own divisions and split it out that way, just so there's not so much white space along the bottom of the board. And just to remind people, Arizona's moving to the Central, where it gets more difficult to make the playoffs than the Pacific. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say so. The Central should be a more difficult division to make the playoffs in. So, be interesting to see how things work out for the Coyotes, who likely will be going away from this logo as well and going to the Kachina full time. Number 22, Chicago. So for Chicago, a season that started off pretty well, and then it ended out not as great. Once they were playing the teams ahead of them in the standings, it fell apart. So we'll see how things go for them next year. But like I said, it's harder to make the playoffs in the Central than it is in the Pacific. So we'll see how that affects the Chicago Blackhawks. And of course, if Taves comes back, that could make a big difference as well. Number 21, Philadelphia. So for the Flyers, the Flyers are coming off of a down year. Usually when they come off a down year, they have another up year. So they're due. I'll probably pick them for a playoff spot this year just because they make the playoffs every other year. That's just, I don't know why that happens. They miss the playoffs every other year. I took them to make the playoffs this year, and they didn't. Number 20, Calgary Flames. The Flames, I'm going to be interested to see how this offseason turns out now that we're officially in the offseason. Calgary should be a lot better than they are. Calgary showed a couple years ago how good they could be. They should be better than what they are. And in adding Markstrom and Tanev, those are two major pieces that were supposed to fix problems with the team. And you can argue that they did, but does it expose that other problems with the team go a little bit deeper than we might have thought? And probably so. So we'll see what happens with them. Number 19. I've moved them around somewhat. Ottawa. So for Ottawa, I ended up dropping them a couple spots from where I had them at the very end of the season because I know they had a great second half to the season. It's going to be hard to follow that up. And I thought there were a couple of teams that missed the playoffs that I think are likely in a better spot than they are. So you'll notice there's no teams that were in the playoffs that I've got on this board to this stage, right? Which is totally on purpose. But for Ottawa, we'll see how things go for them next year. I'm optimistic that they're going to be very competitive. But again, the Atlantic could very well be a nightmare. Number 18 is the New York Rangers. And this might be the heaviest of the ones that I have. New York is, of course, going through their own change at the top. We'll see how that works out for them. They have a lot of good young kids. They have a good young goaltending tandem. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. Adam Fox gave them reasons to be optimistic with a blue line that's been much maligned over the years. But yeah, we'll see how that blue line holds up this coming season. And of course, Keandre Miller, big fan of his. Number 17, Dallas. I don't want to rule out Dallas having a bounce back season, but if you look at the Central, you've got Colorado, you've got Minnesota, and as long as Kaprizov's still there, Minnesota should very well be in a playoff spot. Nashville, I wouldn't write them off for a playoff spot yet. Winnipeg, I wouldn't necessarily write them off either. And then you've got St. Louis, who should be kind of angry and hungry based on the results of this year's playoffs and then how the regular season went for them as well. So it's going to be tough for Dallas. It's not going to be a given that they jump right back in. But I have them at 17, so they're close. Now we're into the playoff teams that got eliminated. Number 16, St. Louis. For the Blues, now we've got Tarasenko wanting his way out. But I did these rankings before that came out. It just feels like for St. Louis that the 2019 Cup was great. It may very well end up being a one and done. And so I have them at 16 on the board overall. Number 15, Oilers. The Oilers, are they a contender? If you ask that question, you're going to get varied opinions. From yes to no to maybe, and then all of the other shades of gray in between. The Edmonton Oilers had a disastrous playoffs after what was a really solid regular season. I would expect them to be pretty darn good in the regular season again. So if you look at the Pacific, Vegas should win that division. You've got the Oilers, who should be pretty good. Calgary may very well have that bounce back. But on this board, from this division, Anaheim is 30th. LA is 28th. San Jose is 25th. Vancouver is 27th. So that right there, that's half your division. So these teams are going to need to improve a lot in the offseason, but it really does look like the Oilers should at worst be top 3, unless Seattle is able to jump them and bounce them out of a top 3 spot. But you've got McDavid, you've got Draisaitl, you've got a pretty solid blue line. It'll be interesting to see how they replace Barrie, if Barrie does in fact leave, and what they do to replace him. But, you know, for the Oilers, things are pretty good, again, regular season-wise. Now the pressure in the postseason, I think, is going to get bigger. 14, one of those where do they go from here teams is Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh had a disappointing out in the first round. This year should have been better. Everything during the regular season indicated that Pittsburgh should be able to get out of the first round this year, at bare minimum. And then they didn't. So Pittsburgh definitely has some moves to make in the offseason, as most teams do. And it's a matter of trying to make sure that you're able to rebuild around Malkin, around Crosby, and around Letang, who apparently all three are sticking around going nowhere, and they want to retire as members of the Penguins. Questions about goaltending are valid, and we'll see how they address that in the offseason. Number 13, also a surprise first-round knockout in Washington. The Capitals, the 2018 Cup winners. So here's the interesting thing. 2018 Cup winners, 2016, 2017, and 2019. So recent Stanley Cup winners, all in the teens. And for Washington, there are questions about Kuznetsov. There are questions about how much Ovechkin might make, how long that contract's going to go, and how determined he is to catch Gretzky on the all-time list. The Capitals are going to be a fun one to watch this offseason. And, of course, I would expect Samsonov protected, Vanacek exposed. I would not be surprised to see Seattle take Vanacek, which would then open up questions about their backup. Do you have Copley then remain as the backup? Do you bring somebody else in? Questions will abound. And whether or not the Capitals just need to get younger and maybe their window has fully closed and it's time to move to the next stage. Number 12, Nashville. Nashville showed in the second half of the season that they could stay competitive. What's interesting to me about Nashville is that Duchesne and Johansson both had down years, and Nashville still makes the playoffs. And in the Central, they should still be a top 4 team. They should still be a playoff team. So it will be interesting to see what kind of moves they make beyond the Arvidsson trade. You have to think they're going to bring somebody else in. They've been looking to spend cap money. They wanted to spend some money in the last couple of off seasons on players that didn't necessarily join the team. Whether or not they then make a side deal with Seattle to move one of their contracts out in order to free up some more space, that will be interesting. And of course, who they do or don't protect will be very interesting, and we'll know in a week what happens there. So now we're in the top row, which is now 11 teams. Right? So in the top row, we have Florida starting things out at 11. Florida had an excellent season. Then they lost in the first round. Here's where it gets interesting. So for people who don't believe that Florida is going to contend, they can say, well, they got knocked out in the first round again. But Florida fans can answer with, or people who believe in Florida can answer with, they got knocked out by the Stanley Cup champions. And they put some doubt in their minds before they finally got knocked out, which I think is accurate. And not only that, Florida's the only team that kind of had Vasilevsky's number at points in that playoff series. So Florida, I don't think they're a one and done. I think that for Florida, and this division could very well be the toughest in the league next season. You have Boston, who should still be pretty good. Montreal, who are, coming off of a Stanley Cup Finals appearance. Toronto, who are an excellent regular season team. Absolutely they are. Tampa Bay, who back-to-back Stanley Cups. And I know Toronto fans don't like to hear, excellent regular season team, but it's true. The regular season numbers have been very good for the last, 4 or 5 years now. Then in the postseason, it just doesn't work out, and they have to find a way over that hump. But this division is going to be difficult because, again, Boston, Toronto, Montreal, Tampa, and then you have Florida. And all of them should be competing. And I don't necessarily think Boston's going to still be in that upper echelon next year. We'll see what happens with them, with Taylor Hall, and with other moves they need to make in the offseason. But yeah, I have Florida at 11 because I do think it's going to be tough to knock them out. And then Toronto at 10. For the Toronto Maple Leafs, again, they were up 3-1 in the first round. It looked like they were at least going to be in the top 8 in this video, and they weren't. And all year I heard about how that division was created just so Toronto would win. The reality is that division was created because you weren't allowed to cross the border. So either you had the all-Canadian division or you had the Canadian teams playing out of the States, which they may have looked at, but I don't think they looked at it really seriously. I don't know that you could find 6 locations where it would work in every way that the NHL would want it to work. So Toronto, they win the division in the regular season, and then in the postseason, they blow a 3-1 series lead. And that hurts. That absolutely hurts. I know Tavares was out, but still, when you're up 3-1, you should be able to win that 4th game in that series. So Toronto does have some question marks this season. Number 9, Minnesota. Minnesota took Vegas to 7 games. I thought they handled Vegas pretty well this year. Now, if they'd played Colorado in the first round, maybe they get wiped out. Right? That's just how matchups work. But Minnesota, I thought, had a pretty good year. Their goaltending was solid. Their blue line was excellent. And every time Kaprizov's on the ice, it's exciting to watch. It's exciting to watch hockey. The most exciting Minnesota's arguably ever been. Although those who watch Marian Gaborik would say, well, maybe. But and fair point. But again, Minnesota, I think with Kaprizov, this could be the most exciting run they've ever had. Now, notice I said exciting, not necessarily the most successful. Okay, so we're into the top 8. And, of course, we're into teams that got eliminated in the second round. So, for a team that got eliminated in the second round, Winnipeg. Winnipeg absolutely wipes out the Oilers in the first round. And then they get wiped out in the second round. Now, Scheifele was out? Yes. But what if that's the problem? If people are going to say, well, Scheifele was knocked out via suspension, so that's why Winnipeg loses like that, okay. But remember, last year in the qualifying round against Calgary, they lost a couple of top guys and then got run out. So it may still be saying that Winnipeg's depth is not good enough to win come playoff time. And so there are some question marks I have with Winnipeg that I've had all year, and they're still there. Their blue line, I think, is the biggest question mark. Number 7, I do not have an auto emblem for Carolina. And I've been looking. Trust me, I've been looking. You can see the teams I don't have one for. And they stand out to me anyways. They stand out. On camera, they may look perfectly fine. To me, they stand out. But number 7, Carolina, excellent run. Really, really good regular season. Postseason, it looked like there was something special maybe going on. I thought they were going to make the finals. They didn't. I still think it's coming. That's why I'm wearing Carolina for this video. And, of course, I'm wearing their old jersey, not their current road jersey. But I still think Carolina can do something come playoff time. And these losses, they add up. But I also think that experience is important. I think that losing does teach you how to win. I know that's cliche, but I agree with the cliche in that case. Number 6, Boston. Boston was getting excellent production from that second line until they didn't. The Islanders shut everybody down except that first line. And Boston, once again, looked like a first-line team by the time they got eliminated by the Islanders. That's a problem. They need to permanently fix that problem. And there's been patchwork moves made to try to fix it. Of course, Taylor Hall right now on the way to potentially being a free agent. We'll see. We'll see whether or not Boston's able to keep him or if they're able to fix that problem with the second line. And, of course, the whole will Krejci play or not is hanging over Boston as well. So right now, they're number 6. Again, once we reach free agency, these are going to move around. And the next time I do a power rankings will likely be once free agency settled out and me kind of saying, I think this is where the teams are at. And again, it's tremendous guesswork, but it's fun. Power rankings videos, to me, are meant to be fun. Just stay out of the comment section has been the rule. Number 5, Colorado. The Avs were supposed to be the team. I had picked them to be the team. A lot of other people had as well. A lot of publications had picked them to be the team to win the Stanley Cup. And it just didn't happen. They didn't have it. And the funny thing is, last year against Dallas, I remember they almost did. They almost came back. They almost knocked out Dallas. But they didn't. They didn't quite come back and knock out Dallas. So, as heartwarming as the story could have been if they knocked out Dallas for Colorado fans, and for people who don't like Dallas, it didn't happen. And this year, they just didn't have enough against Vegas. Vegas seemed to want it more than they did. So for Colorado, there's a lot of questions going into next season. And now some of those really cheap contracts, whether it's entry level or it's just a really decently priced contract, I'm talking Makar with the entry level, now they're going to start to have some cap issues. This is where they have to watch their cap. How much is Grubauer worth? Vezina finalist, but is he good enough was a question starting to be asked after the Vegas series. So we'll see. So now we're into the Final Four. Number 4, Vegas. Vegas got knocked out. And against a team that, by all rights, they should have beaten them. And this is the reality. Should they have beaten Montreal? Sure. Did they? No. So that's just, it's been a reality in hockey for as long as I can remember, where teams should beat these, like the Edmonton Oilers in 1982 should beat the LA Kings. Didn't. And it just, the Oilers would eventually win their Stanley Cups, but that year wasn't their year. They had a great regular season, and then in the postseason, it didn't happen. And it didn't detract from what LA did, but it meant that, Edmonton was figuring things out, and Vegas is still figuring things out. And as long as it seems, it's only been 4 seasons. So they're going to have to make some moves. I honestly think there needs to be more character guys, for lack of a better term. You look at the bottom 6 for Tampa, and then you compare it with the bottom 6 for Vegas, and it just feels like the depth for Vegas is a little wanting, and it felt like that's what hurt them against Montreal. So number 3 on the board, and this is where I'm going outside of my usual guidelines here. I've got Montreal at 3. I have Montreal at 3 because I have the Islanders at 2. The Islanders were a tougher out for number 1, which is Tampa. So now let's go through all 3. Montreal knocks out Toronto. They knock out Winnipeg, so 10-8. The Islanders knock out 14-6. So you can argue that the tougher challenges were had by the Islanders before they met up with Tampa. Tampa had gone through Florida, and then they went through Carolina. So they went through 11-7. Now Montreal in the Stanley Cup final played very well after the first 3 games. Games 4 and 5 they played well. Game 2 they played well enough to keep it close. Maybe they should have won that. They don't end up winning it. Game 5, of course, was your typical Tampa Bay closeout game now. Let Vasi win it. Vasilevsky gets the shutout. The Islanders, 2 years running now, have been the team that, for my money, has given Tampa the hardest time. To me, the Islanders get number 2 on the board because they gave Tampa the toughest challenge. And I think if the Islanders had played Montreal in the semifinals, I think the Islanders probably take Montreal out. This is where the guesswork comes in. But I really think that the Islanders, the depth they have and how well coached they are, it's been very impressive to watch 2 years running. Both years they get knocked out by Tampa. The consolation in that is you got knocked out by the Stanley Cup champions. And again, I think the Islanders gave them the toughest challenge. So this is the template I'm working with. I cannot have Montreal below 3rd because they knocked out Vegas. Vegas who knocked out Colorado. So for me, Montreal legit right now stands at 3rd based on what happened in the playoffs. But again, the Islanders I thought were the tougher out for Tampa. And Tampa is in a whole other world right now as a back-to-back champion. And they're going to try to gear up for that 3rd straight. And for all of the controversy that's come out of them winning it, they're going to gear up, and those players are going to use all of the comments and all the controversy to try to push themselves towards a 3rd straight cup. And the interesting part is we'll likely see a lot of turnover with the Tampa Bay roster, which means you have brand new guys that don't have a ring yet. And sometimes that can be an important inspiration as well, especially if it's a veteran. You look at Colorado in 01, that was about getting Ray Bourque a Stanley Cup as much as anything else. So we'll see. But yeah, the Islanders were impressive. Montreal's run was fantastic. I understand there's a lot of people that want to get mad about it and hate on it. We'll see what they do during the offseason. I like Caulfield. I like Suzuki. Carey Price showed in the playoffs. He can still be Carey Price. Can he get beaten? Yeah, every goalie can. Every goalie in the league can be beaten. You look at any team that got eliminated in the playoffs, and maybe other than Nedeljkovic, because when I talk about this, people say not Nedeljkovic, but maybe other than Nedeljkovic, there's been complaining. But remember that bad angle goal Nedeljkovic allowed, and then Mrazek ends up in net? Yeah. So every goaltender is flawed on some scale with something, and it's just a matter of some goalies are really good at hiding those flaws. In some cases, the team's able to cover up for it. But yeah, Carey Price is still amongst the best in the league when it's a really important game in the playoffs. And yeah, Montreal showed they play very well as underdogs. So there you go. Power rankings. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And if you're wondering when are we going to get the puck power rankings, well, A, we're not sure on the when yet, and B, I have a lot of different sets of pucks I'll be using for when there's puck power rankings. So when I'm using hockey pucks for the power rankings, that's going to be a lot of fun, and there's a lot of different looks that I can use for that. I have the set that's the mascots. I have a set of all the mascots in the NHL. I have a set of all the logos where it's like a jersey, it's a stitched jersey front on it. I have a set as well that's kind of an old-fashioned looking setup for all 32 logos. And then I have one too that's just your basic, basically the pucks that you'd see at a game for all 32 teams. So yeah, that's kind of fun. And I think I have enough around that are like specialty pucks and classic pucks and ones I've had for ages that I can use as well. So looking forward to being able to do that. And for the auto emblems, I'll probably start using those during the regular season. I'll be using these for when there's just the one game on, or there's a matinee game where I'm doing a review for that on its own. All right, again, this is just for fun and it's a guide. This is absolutely totally a fun look at the power rankings. Let me know why I'm wrong. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.